Hello, my name is Bob Wiele. I'm founder and president of One Smart World, and I'm delighted that you're joining us today for our Smart Thinking webinar series. Today's focus is on the power of habit, 5 ways to make positive change, based on the new book by Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit. At One Smart World, our focus is on designing, developing, and delivering programs, products, and tools so progressive leaders can accelerate collaboration and innovation in their organizations, find new ways to improve collaborative meeting productivity, and find ways to engage their people to work smarter and reduce the waste of time, money, and talent in the workplace. We believe that collaboration is a critical key success factor in today's complex workplace, and that as an organization, our purpose is to make a positive difference in your personal and organizational effectiveness, and to give you some tools and techniques that are very easy to use to help you not only build a collaborative workplace, but help build a smarter world. We work with a wide variety of clients in both the corporate sector, the education sector, and the not-for-profit sector, and our focus tends to be on the leadership development stream, the team building and collaborative innovation stream, as well as helping organizations take complex problems, bring people together, and figure out solutions to address those problems. One of the challenges we find, and we'll be talking about this throughout the webinar today, is that collaboration has to deal with 3 levels of diversity. One is the demographic diversity of who we are, our ethnicity, our age, our gender. The second level is our knowledge and skills. Many of us have come from different backgrounds in terms of what we know and do. We come from different vertical fields of expertise, and that makes it more complicated for when we get together. The third level of diversity that we approach is on cognitive style. We may be from different countries, we may be from different disciplines, we also may think and feel differently. And it's that level of complexity that we work on to help companies get different people onto the same page to collaborate and work more effectively together. Today's webinar is going to focus on a book called The Power of Habit, and I watch people on a daily basis, including myself, my family members, my colleagues at work, and our clients, get caught into habits and figure out, how do we break the habit? How do we change how we do to respond more appropriately and effectively in the world that we live in? The book that Duhigg has produced has been a bestseller now for the last 3 to 4 months. And because leadership, performance, and collaboration and innovation are on everyone's priority list, we're always looking for new ways. We're looking for new how-tos. And particularly as the world becomes increasingly volatile, it's important that we examine how we approach things and can we improve our adaptability in order to be successful in this complex world we live in. So our purpose then is, can we find some simple tips? And what I'll be focusing in on today is I've excerpted about 5 key lessons from his book. I'd encourage you to buy the book. It's a good read. It's a stimulating read. He brings in a lot of research that you'll find interesting, but he's also got some very practical tools that I think will give you the insights that you need to inspire yourself to make some of the adjustments that we all need to do in this world we live in. If you're on Twitter, please let us know. If you want to tweet to us, we'll engage you and ensure that 2 of you will win prizes for those of you who participate in the Twitter conversation. William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, really looked at life as a series of habits. And if you look at how you spend your day-to-day life, research will tell us that about 40% of the activities we take on a daily basis are strictly the result of automatic, preset habits. We just do things the same way in the same old fashion. We've got a dog, Ralph, who, despite the fact he's 10 years, when he sees the people walking by the house, will bark uncontrollably. Although he knows after all this time, none of them are dangerous, none of them will attack us. That's part of his habit. I have my own habits as well, and one of the messages of Duhigg's book is to become mindful. As we look at the world out there, the military have come up with a term they called VUCA, and I've turned it into AVUCA to describe our 2012 world. What it means is we experience a world of volatility. Look at what's happening in the Middle East these days, increasing uncertainty in the economy. The challenges we face are more complex than anything we've ever seen before. And there's no clarity, there's no certainty anymore. There's a level of ambiguity. And you put all that together with an accelerated push on the front end, and that's the VUCA world we live in. And that's why we need to have better habits to think more effectively and work smarter together. And what Duhigg talks about is that habits can be changed if we know how they work. So we're going to start off the webinar by taking a look at how do habits work in the first point, and then look at some of the keys to making effective change from there on. The Olympics are this summer of 2012, and one of the events is the high jump. And this little graphic that was put together by Richard Tanner Pascali, who's one of my favorite management consultants, has been around for many years, looked at how the paradigm changed in one of the Olympic events in track and field called the high jump. And as you can see, looking from left to right, in the early part of the 19th century or the 20th century, high jumpers jumped over the bar by the way you'd leap over a low fence. And then the Western roll and straddle came along, where you basically tried to roll over the bar. You got to jump, and then you rolled over face first. That only took you so far. And what jumpers found, by changing their habit, by changing their routine, by changing their approach, they could really go that much higher. And Dick Fosbury and Debbie Brill, male and female jumpers, came up with the Fosbury flop, which was jumping over the bar backwards, a counterintuitive change in habit that led them to achieve greater heights. And all high jumpers today competing at the Olympic level use the Fosbury flop. So let's take a look at how habits work. Our 5 points to make positive change are here on the slide. Understand the habit loop and the golden rule. Harness the power of belief and belonging. Use keystone habits to drive change. Develop your willpower, and use small wins. So let's go through these 5 points. What Duhigg has uncovered is a simple 3-step habit loop. That we have a cue. A cue could be a piece of chocolate. It could be a cold beer. It could be a person that annoyed you over a period of time. Or it could be a time of day that triggers a routine response for which we get a reward. So the trick in understanding our habits is to walk through these three steps. The first one is the cue. The cue is the trigger that tells your brain to shift into automatic mode. So for Ralph, when the little old lady in the walker goes by, or somebody walking a dog, the cue for them is it stimulates and arouses him to respond. For us, many of the cues happen instantaneously. It could be a look, a tone of voice. It could be something that triggers an emotional response, an unmindful response that then allows us to get into a routine. What a habit does is allows us to save time and effort by just automatically responding. The problem is when the cue and the routine mismatch and we don't get the right reward that we need. So when you look at the routine, a routine is a physical, mental, or emotional response pattern. So it's a way of responding automatically. It can happen very, very quickly. I look at myself, I'll walk into the same convenience store, the same guys behind the counter, I reach for the same piece of red licorice, I buy the same newspaper, we have the same conversation, I walk out the door, I don't even think of buying something else, talking about something else, it's just a routine, it solves the problem for me. So what happens in habits, if the routine doesn't match the situation, that's where we can get into problems. And finally, the reward helps the brain remember if this is worth using in the future. And often the sample rewards are the food that we eat, an emotional payoff, or a sense of accomplishment. I was in a meeting yesterday, and the emotional payoff was we very carefully set the routine in the meeting to ensure it met both the client's needs and our needs, as opposed to freewheeling. And the reward at the end of the meeting was a sense that we'd accomplished something important and had put into place and into momentum a series of activities that would help reward both our client, the client that he works with, and ourselves as an organization. So that's the 3-habit loop. Now the trick in terms of changing is what he calls the golden rule of change. If you want to make a difference and change your habits, you've got to peel back and take a look at the routine response. Is there a way I can change how I respond? If this person continues to annoy me, can I change how they appear to me and how I frame them from a problem to an opportunity? in many cases today, there's so much stuff coming at us that our routine responses are ineffective and continue to contribute to the problem. So in terms of the lessons of the first point, the habit loop and the golden rule, the more you can be mindful of knowing the cues and what triggers you, the more control you'll get over the response that you have. The second point is, if you can actually write down and map out a simple step-by-step, deliberately purposeful response routine, you're going to be more effective. So instead of responding with a retort, what if you responded with a question? Instead of responding emotionally, what if you responded in a neutral kind of receptive tone of voice? And the trick is then to, at the same time, to know the reward you're looking for, which is a sustainable win-win solution in most cases, and then expand or revise that reward so you can respond appropriately. So that's our first point, the 3-point habit loop and the golden rule. Now let's move on to number 2. This is a really critical one if you're serious about changing your habits. Henry Ford, I thought, really nailed it when he talked about whether you believe you can or you can't, you're usually right. Now, if you look at organizations that are highly effective in changing beliefs about what's possible, Alcoholics Anonymous and Weight Watchers have both been extremely effective. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. A friend of mine has been an addict for quite some time, and she was celebrating her 2-year period of being clean. The meeting was very powerful. It was in a church hall in a small community. There were approximately 25 people there. Every one of them had been an addict and stood up, much like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and said, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an addict," and told their story. And what was so powerful in the room was the impact of those people who had experienced the same kind of problem being a support group to those people who were declaring the problem that they were dealing with and the support that they had. And Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous have all of those people have sponsors, and those sponsors act as coaches and guides because they've been through it themselves. And much like Weight Watchers as well, they understand that by having a support group, it's easier to do things in groups as opposed to doing it alone. Now, I want to focus next on the power of belief. This is some really interesting research I came across in a book called The Talent Code that's reinforced in Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit. There was a question asked about how come some kids who play musical instruments outperform others, and what is it? And a researcher did a longitudinal study working on 168 kids in a program where they began with the kids who were 7 and 8 years old before they even picked up a musical instrument. And they followed them over a series of about a decade or more to see how they progressed. And they tried to find out how come some kids perform at a much higher level than other kids do. Was it their IQ? No. Was it their hand-eye dexterity? No. Was it their family? No. Was it their genetics? No. What was it? And they looked at it, and they looked at the kids from a number of vantage points. And first of all, they looked at the kids in terms of how hard do these kids work? So they categorized 3 levels of commitment. A low level of commitment was about practicing a half hour a week. A moderate level of practice was about 45 minutes a week, and a high level of practice was an hour or more, an hour to an hour and a half a week. And so they said, well, how come some kids practice an hour to an hour and a half a week, and their performance level is 1/4 the time of other kids? And the performance level was measured by external observers who were proficient in music and could measure performance using this Watkins-Farnham performance scale. So as you can see here, even at the very beginning, at the low level, there's about a 50% difference between the short-term commitment and the long-term commitment numbers. Now, what was that determined by? Well, they asked the kids at the very beginning, before they even chose an instrument, how long do you think you'll be playing this instrument for? And while most of the kids said, I don't know, because they didn't even know what the instrument was, so with a little probing, some of them said to themselves, I'm just going to play it for a little while, maybe while I'm in school. Other kids said, well, I'm not sure, probably a little bit longer. And other kids changed their perception and said, you know, I want to be a musician. And those kids who saw themselves playing that instrument for a long period of time regardless of the amount of time they perform, that sort of infusion of I see myself being a musician, I am a musician, as opposed to I'm going to work at being a musician or I should be a musician, at the same level of practice had a significant difference in their performance. And it reminds me of Clara Hughes, the distinguished Canadian Olympian, who at 12 years old was smoking and drinking and living on the dark side of Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada, and saw an Olympic figure skater, a speed skater, Gaetan Boucher, perform. Instead, I want to do that. She'd never speed skated in her life, and she went on to win gold medals in speed skating, and went on to win medals in the Summer Olympics as well in cycling. And she's still competing to this day at 37. It's a remarkable story of once she saw herself being like that, it changed her performance. So if you're trying to change a habit, if you don't really see yourself as being thin, or you really don't see yourself exercising on a regular basis, or in the addict's case, if you don't see yourself being able to be clean, it'll be very difficult. And that's why the impact of belief is so important. And you couple that with a group of people around you, the belonging, then you've really got a very powerful combination. So the summary of the second point, the power of belief and belonging, is it's very hard to change if you don't believe it. If you don't believe you can, you probably can't, as Henry Ford said. But if you believe you can, then that's a core driver. Doing it alone is hard, and finding groups are so important. That's why people use the power of groups to run. My daughter Lisa recently completed a half marathon, and she told me the story of she had a couple of friends that she ran with all the time, and when one of them called up and said it's time to run, it just overcame the inertia. I really don't want to go today. It's cold. I'm tired, etc. The power of the group helps you get through. So in education, the power of your classmates are important. In business, the power of teams are important to build in new habits. Now let's move on to number 3. One of the things that Duhigg identifies is what he calls keystone habits. And keystone habits are, if you start in one place, it can make an impact in other parts of your life. It reminded me of the funny movie with Bill Murray way back called What About Bob, where Richard Dreyfuss plays a psychologist, and Bill Murray plays this a difficult patient, to say the least. And Dreyfuss's approach as a psychologist is all about baby steps. Take little baby steps. Well, keystone habits are a baby step habit that allows you to ripple out and have impact in other parts of your life. So here's an example of a keystone habit. Here's the guy who says, well, this morning I spent an hour on the bike. Tomorrow I intend to start pedaling. So at least he's going in the right direction. He's got something to do. And once he starts pedaling, that will probably have an impact not only on his exercise, it'll probably have an impact, or it will have an impact on how he feels about himself. And the better he feels about himself, the more likely he'll pick better foods to eat, and the better he'll behave more appropriately in social situations and not pick up that cigarette, not pick up that cold beer, and pick the soda water instead. The story that Duhigg tells in his book is about Paul O'Neill, who came in as the CEO of Alcoa. And when he took over the company, what he really wanted to do was pick one particular area that could have an impact on corporate performance. And he picked the area of safety. And when he started talking at his introduction as CEO, he didn't talk about shareholder value or all that dribble that CEOs often talk about. He said, we're going to focus on one thing. And if we do that really well, that'll have a ripple effect throughout the company. And what he picked was safety. And he said he figured that if people could do one thing extraordinarily well, it could unlock positive changes across the whole organization. What happens often in organizations or in teams, that we all like to row in different directions. And as a result, we end up spinning in circles, and we never really get off the mark, or we end up in conflict and can't get off the nut in the beginning. The trick in creating a keystone habit in a company or in a team is if we can agree to all row together in the same way at the same time, we can achieve remarkable things and not get in each other's way. In our company, we use a simple language that's color-coded to look at thinking. So green refers to creativity, yellow to analysis and organization, and red to driving for results and decisions. I talked to one of our colleagues this morning, and she said they'd had a meeting yesterday where they were all very analytical thinkers, but she said, we need to come up with new ideas, and they got everyone rowing in the same direction, and generated a series of new ideas on a program challenge that they had that allowed them to organize those into different categories, and at the end of the 2-hour meeting, make some critical decisions that tapped into the best thinking of their group. At Alcoa, what O'Neill found was as soon as he made safety a habit, he told all the employees, this is the aluminum company of Canada, of America, who had worldwide plants, he said, if anybody who is a manager or a supervisor does not report an incident within 24 hours, I want you to call me on my home phone. He had workers calling in from all over the world. They were more excited about, if I can call the CEO, I've got an idea on how we can improve productivity or save money, or I've got an idea on how to change some equipment we have that'd be good for all of us. They found a huge increase in engagement. They had a big increase in employee input, and it helped managers and employees align the culture around if we can keep people safe, then that allows us to look at other things that undermine our performance and productivity as a company. As a result, innovation accelerated, accidents reduced significantly, and the keystone habit of focusing on that one thing led to a 200% increase in stock value in the decade that he was the CEO. So keystone habits basically allow you to create a positive spiral. A friend of mine, Ron, has recently decided at the ripe old age of late 60s to become relatively a vegetarian. He and his wife live in a suburb, and his neighbor next door was saying, how come you haven't powered up the barbecue? Well, he decided to look at a different approach to his eating habits. When I last saw him, he had lost 25 pounds. He said, I've never felt better in my life. He's playing a lot of golf. The barbecue hasn't been fired up. He's cut back on drinking wine and beer, and he just feels terrific. And he said that one focus of deciding to change my eating habit had a ripple effect in terms of how I think about myself, the structures that we have in meal preparation and food selection, but also in taking more time to exercise and pay attention to my health. So the keystone habit for you is to say, where's the right place to start? As an individual, or as Duhigg talks about, in an organization or in society. What's the right keystone habit? If I can pick that, then I can use that to start a ripple effect, a positive ripple effect. And I found in our experience in working with people in companies, if you're really exhausted or you're really going flat out, it's all about timing. You've got to create a space to find that right keystone habit. And once you've got it going, you can leverage the gains from that habit to begin to remake other patterns in your life. So that's the power of the keystone habit. So we know the 3-step loop, the power of belief and belonging, the importance of picking a keystone habit. And now we're going to look at the next step in success that Duhigg identifies, and that is the power of willpower. As you can see in this diagram, Ralph is clearly not in this picture. These dogs are exercising incredible restraint, and willpower is about using restraint and self-regulation in order to achieve your goals. One of the things that the U.S. Military Academy at West Point found was the single biggest factor that would predict success in the military was something that's called grit. Now, grit is being written up increasingly in the literature. We call it personal spirit. We've been at this for a while now. But grit is basically the perseverance to go through obstacles and setbacks with a spirit of positive outlook, a spirit of initiative and perseverance in order to overcome the situations that you face to achieve a goal. What we're finding and Duhigg reports this, what we're finding in habit change, that willpower becomes the single most important element. If you don't have the willpower and the grit as an element of your keystone habit, it's going to be extremely difficult. It's kind of like a foundation anchor. We've also found that willpower is a learnable skill. It's like a muscle. And like a muscle, it can be weakened by too much exercise, or it can be weakened by poor leadership. There was a story that was reported in Duhigg's work on how willpower has been discovered not only as a learnable skill, but as a muscle. And he reports only psychology profs can do this, and they can only get away with psychology students. But here's what they did. In the experiment, they brought in two groups. In one group, they were brought into a room. The instructor came in and said, look, there's a pile of steaming chocolate chip cookies on the table here. This is a psychology experiment. Please don't eat the cookies. exercise restraint. We're trying to make this as most successful an experiment as possible. If you have any feedback for us or ideas on how to make it better, our goal is to make this a more pleasant experience for you. Thank you very much. The second group came in, a different instructor came in and basically said, don't eat the cookies, and I will be back later. And people just sat there. The real point of the experiment happened in the second phase. Both groups were taken in and put onto computers that looked at their ability to maintain perseverance and willpower in a stressful situation where they had to kind of do some random matching on the computer. What they found was the impact of the positive psychological climate that invited engagement, gave people a framework for what they were there for in terms of the experiment. Those people were able to persist and persevere quite a bit longer on that second part of the test than people who came out of that experience feeling bummed out, a low sense of control, and not sure what they were there for. They gave up much more quickly on the test that looked at perseverance and willpower. So leadership can have an impact, and if your willpower is weakened because you're tired, then it's not the right time to begin habit change. You've got to create that space for yourself that if you exercise willpower, it can be strengthened, and you're in a positive climate. You've got to find the right time and space. So the higher your sense of control, the easier it is to exercise willpower to change your habits. The lower your sense of control, the more difficult it is. I know myself, when I feel overwhelmed, my sense of control goes down, and my willpower to do anything different becomes increasingly compromised. I need to create time and space for myself to say, in order for me to get back on my game and go to the next level, I've got to make those lists, focus in on the critical things I need to do, the wildly important goals as opposed to the whirlwind that I'm surrounded in all the time. And as soon as I do that, my sense of control goes up, and I get a refocus in terms of what I need to do. And that allows me, as part of my new routine, then, to focus on the rewards I want to get. Todd Hetherington, who's a researcher at Dartmouth, I think summarized this point really well. And if you're looking at habit change, and it relates to some of the points that have been covered already. And he says, when you learn to force yourself to go to the gym or start your homework or eat a salad instead of a hamburger, part of what's really happening is you're changing how you think. People get better at regulating their impulses. They learn how to distract themselves from temptations. And once you've gotten into that willpower groove, your brain is practiced as helping you focus on your goal. One of the things we're finding from psychology is when you go to change your habit, what you're actually doing is rewiring your brain, and you're overriding the existing circuit that's automatic, your habit, with a new behavior pattern. And practice, 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 deliberate practice, the more you do it, the more you reinforce that new habit, and willpower is a key driver for that. So in terms of harnessing your own willpower to ensure you find the right way forward, it really helps to be deliberate, to write down what your plans are and your goals. We often do that, but also to pre-plan the routine. How specifically will you manage your time? How do you focus on the core priorities and not get distracted by the whirlwind of the day-to-day activities? Some people like to use slogans and mantras. There was a review of a book that came out this week in the UK, and I'm going to get the title wrong, but it was something like, run, fat bitch, run. And it was talking about using mantras to motivate yourself. The woman who reported on the book talked about the practice that you have when you start to get into this weight loss program. You have to stand in front of a mirror virtually naked and take a look at yourself and say, do I really like what I see? And then you use a positive mantra around, okay, it's time to exercise and eat those vegetables and turn down that chocolate cake. So slogans and mantras can often help reinforce the right positive behavior. And doing a little willpower workout every day, just change your habit. Do something different. Exercise restraint. Willpower is about that sort of self-regulation that you can do on a regular basis to monitor your performance and progress. And if you can, in a group, if you can ask at the end of every meeting to say, what's one thing we can do next meeting to work smarter, and how can we make sure we integrate that habit into our next performance so we can all row in the same direction in a more deliberate way, then you're likely to be more effective. In this case, you're harnessing the group's willpower for that continuous improvement. And finally, to move on to point number 5, it's all about small wins. If you can use small wins, you can build momentum. Don't try and change everything. Rome wasn't built in a day. Do things step by step. And if you look at the cover of Duhigg's book, and I quite like the top 2 circles when looking at the treadmill, because habits are like treadmills. They're automatic things. Until you step back and say, what am I really doing here? It's difficult to change. And if you look at the two pictures on the bottom half of the cover, in the first case, he's escaped the treadmill and is running. And in the second case, on the right-hand time, he's playing and improvising. He's really gone beyond that. And in small wins, what we're trying to do is break out of the automatic patterns that have been created in our minds and our brains by stepping back, looking at the routine, and then finding ways of moving forward in a constructive way. At Starbucks, what they do is find simple ways and simple routines that allow people to change their habits. So they've got something, for example, here's a small way that they train their folks behind the counter to deal with customers. And they use simple mantras like latte. And latte, in this case, is a method for dealing with customers who are upset. So latte means step number one is listen to the customer. Step number two is acknowledge their complaint. Don't be defensive, so you shift into a receptive, or what we would call yellow state of mind. Listen to what the customer has to say, acknowledge and value what they have to say, whether you agree with them or not. And step number three is take action by solving the problem. So listen, acknowledge, take action, and then thank them for raising the issue, and then explain why the problem occurred in the first place and what you'll do in the future to make sure it doesn't happen again. They've also got something called connect, discover, and respond for taking orders. So again, simple routines that allow small wins that create, simple routines that allow you to have small wins that over time add cumulatively to your success. And what Duhigg says that small wins help us build momentum. They fuel transformative change by adding step by step small advantages that turn into patterns that convince people that bigger achievements are possible. You know, they always say, how do you eat an elephant? What's the best way to eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. And what we found in our work, having been in this business for over 40 years, one of the things you need to do is take that baby step, one step at a time, and over time, you know, that step by step gets you going in the direction that builds a success and helps you deal in a persevering kind of way with the challenges you face, and you build a body of work that can be successful. So small wins, basically, the key is to map out the deliberate routine in chunks. So again, going back to changing the routine, build the chunks. What are the elements of success? The second thing here in small wins is learn to be mindful. Take a step back. Take 2 or 3 deep breaths and say, what's really going on here? And then take those baby steps forward. And one of the things we know from learning is that practice, deliberate practice over and over, creates new patterns in the brain and new routines that allow you to respond in a more effective way. The Olympic athlete, Michael Phelps, has everything down to a T for his competition days. He has routines for every single, he gets up at exactly the same time, has exactly the same routine prior to standing up in front of his fellow swimmers getting on the starting deck. Every single step is pre-programmed, and they're all small little steps that are made automatic so he doesn't have to think about it. And by changing that routine, he has these small wins that has led him to become the Olympic champion that he is. So just to summarize, the 5 ways for positive habit change, we want to put this into a little model. And we're going to follow up with you. We've got an article, it's about a 10-page document that summarizes the findings in the book that we'll be sending to you. You can access as a result of this webinar. Step 1 is just raise your awareness. When something triggers at the cue level, what is the craving or deeper motivation that drives your behavior? Ask yourself, what do I feel right before I grab the piece of chocolate? Respond to that question. Feel that emotion. Do what I do in that situation. And then the second thing is try and understand what's going on here. What's going on? Why am I doing this? Why am I trying to respond in this way? What's going on here? What's the deeper issue? The third step is to say, okay, now what's the cue? What actually triggered that? And Duhigg recommends keeping an index card and simply making a mark every time the cue occurs. So somebody that you work with or live with or that you associate with, or a typical type of behavior in a crowd or a group of people, what is it that triggers you? You don't want to be like Ralph and barking uncontrollably every time it happens. You want to become a master of your habits. You want to become a master of your behavior. You want to be able to self-regulate so you respond appropriately. So keep a record of what is the cue. And then here we go again. Replace the existing routine, that kind of knee-jerk response, with a competing response. And the competing response is a deliberate routine. That's an alternative routine to that. So what it gives you is door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. I talked with a client recently about, right now you've got the cues in the organization are telling you to go in a particular way. You've got 3 doors. Door number 1 is abdicate. Door number 2 is tolerate. Door number 3 is innovate. Can you look at those cues and use the data from those cues to build an alternative response? And once you've got that plan and start to put it in place, can you use advanced tracking to see what kind of progress you're making in order to achieve the reward that you have? So a simple notebook or online recording or data collection can get you there. So just to finish off then, I want to thank you for joining us. Our focus at One Smart World is on 3 levels: improving personal and professional effectiveness with the programs and tools that we have. We want to help you accelerate collaborative teamwork and innovation. We also have certification programs for learning and development professionals. As part of our ongoing series, we encourage you to connect with us. We encourage you to share this recording and show with your colleagues. And for those of you interested in our next webinar, our next Smart Thinking webinar, our focus is going to be on accelerating innovation and collaborative business design. And we're going to be using the work of Heather Fraser, who's at the Rotman School of Business at the University of Toronto, who's written a wonderful book called DesignWorks. And it's one of the most innovative and applicable ways that a business can use to take a look at what it's doing with its clients and rethink what the customer experience is all about, visualize a new way of responding to that, and then putting into place an execution plan. We've been using it in our own business over the last few weeks to rethink our business. It's a highly effective way that leaders and organizations can take their team through a process. And Heather's book, it comes with a lot of really cool tools that you can use. So on August 15th at 1 o'clock, 2012, we hope you can join us. We want to thank you again for joining us today. Our focus is to help make the world a smarter place, and we can do that by using new habits, by building new relationships, and achieving higher performance results. So thank you very much. Please contact us at any time with your questions. You can email us at info@onesmartworld.com or phone us at our 705-444-1234 number, or anywhere in North America at 1-800-387-6278. Again, thank you on behalf of our team at One Smart World and our associates and partners around North America and the world. We look forward to connecting with you in the future. Take care. We hope you have a great day.